Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. Today we visit with David Berryhill, owner of Berryhill Farms in Pine Island, and discuss the success he has had in breeding the rare and highly coveted Leicester Longwool Sheep. Kent Tesey provides us a historical perspective on the current Farm Bill, and we get a new tale from storyteller Joanne Lower, a story about her grandmother. All of that here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections, sponsored by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned cooperative in Claremont, Minnesota, produces ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil, and beverage-grade carbon dioxide for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood. The Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, collaborating with businesses and entrepreneurs to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. You can learn more at auri.org. Kahn Tile Supply, Leroy, Minnesota, and New Hampton, Iowa, since 1985, supplying the market with field drain tile products, dual wall, metal culverts, septic systems, PVC, and plumbing supplies.
Today we're at the beautiful Berryhill Farm, northeast of Pine Island, Minnesota, and with us is the owner, David Berryhill. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you.
You got a great thing going here. Tell us about it.
So we raise Leicester Longwool Sheep. It's a heritage breed of sheep. I sell breeding stock, I sell for meat, and we try to utilize the fleece or the wool for all kinds of different projects.
Well, how did you start? I mean, this is a lot of work.
So we moved out here to the farm in 2006. Found out that first summer there's a lot of mowing involved. We have about 9.5 acres. Just thought, well, there's got to be a better way. So we that first year, I think probably 2007, we started with a few sheep to see if we liked it, see how well they did at mowing, and they did a pretty good job. And since that point, we've kind of specialized in the heritage breed. Try to utilize them for all areas of the farm to manage the grass and provide a kind of a lifestyle for my children. Give them an opportunity to grow up in the country and raise animals.
Well, you mentioned the word heritage several times. What exactly do you mean?
So this breed was originally developed in the mid-1700s in Leicestershire, England. At one time, it was the most popular breed in the world.
Really?
Through time and specialization for meat or wool, they've kind of fallen out of favor, and so there's just not a lot of them left. In 1990, Colonial Williamsburg imported 10 sheep of full-blood Leicester Longwools. So everything in the United States at this point goes back at some point to those original 10.
I think earlier you mentioned when we were just walking through the farm, the breed actually became extinct in North America, or at least the United States. Is that true?
There was I think they believe around the 1930s or so, there weren't any more just Leicester Longwool sheep in the United States. There was a small flock in Canada. Colonial Williamsburg, trying to provide animals that would be appropriate to the time period, looked around and they decided Leicester Longwools were mentioned by George Washington, and they thought this would be appropriate.
Why is it important to protect and sustain heritage breeds?
There's characteristics that you get with each individual breed that can be different, and if you lose that one of these founding breeds, you lose some of those characteristics that go with them. There are like 40 different breeds that have Leicester Longwools in their development at some point.
That's fascinating. And when you think about sheep, we go back in time probably to say, starting with Civil War, where it's very necessary for food, but also the fiber. Our officers and our soldiers had wool uniforms, and it was very, very profitable at one time to raise sheep. What's happening in that world now as far as profits?
I think more and more, especially in the United States, people don't like to, there's a lot of alternate fibers out there. There's a lot of people that aren't familiar with lamb. They don't like to eat lamb, and so you know, if you lose one side of it, you start to lose the other side as well. So if you're not raising it for the wool, then you don't have as many animals around, and then you're not butchering as many, and then people aren't eating it, and then they both kind of lose their market.
Well, David, I'm hearing a real theme here. The heritage breed being brought back from extinction, actually. And then I'm hearing, okay, the fiber has value to keep people clothed and warm and comfortable. And then the foods for nutrition and sustainability of people. And also, as we walk around the farm, we saw piles of compost. So it looks like there's a real theme of sustainability here. And you're providing protein, you're providing fiber. Can you elaborate on that?
Typically 1 to 2 times per year. It depends on the year and how the wool is growing. We'll have them sheared. We try to have a shearing day. Last year we had a shearing day in the first part of November, and it was kind of fun. We actually had quite a few people show up for that. It's something you don't see every day, and it's just fascinating to see the shine of the wool when it comes off fresh, because what you see on the outside isn't what's on the inside. Once you see the underside of the wool, it has it just shines.
Nice luster.
Luster, yeah, exactly.
We'll be looking at that more, but it's part of why that wool is very valuable and useful, right?
Correct. I think, and this is probably partly my opinion, but I think one of the reasons it was so popular early on was it is a very spinnable fiber. It's easy to spin, as people have told me. I'm not a big spinner myself. But it's easy to spin. It accepts dyes, whether it's a natural dye or chemical dye. It accepts dyes readily, and it shines through. That luster comes through even with the dye. The Leicester Longwool is a stronger fiber. It's probably not good for making sweaters out of. A little bit rough. It's not a soft fiber, but you can use in the right places for a hat or mittens or slippers. Blankets, yeah. Rugs. It's a very good rug yarn because it's so strong.
And that long fiber must be more useful in the spinning process as well, or at least easier to use, like you said.
Well, and ironically, the longer it gets, you can actually outgrow some of the mechanical mills, because they just can't handle a staple length when it gets too long. Having the locks, the curls, people like to use that for making dolls or Santa Claus. I know I've had people tell me they use it for Santa's beards and that sort of thing. So you get some of the crafts side of that. So Lise, you need to meet friend Dan, the host of Farm Connections.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
What's happening in the yarn barn?
Well, I'm needle felting, and I just started, so I'm not really like really good at it. But
How do you do it?
there's these needles, and you just poke the wool, and it hardens up, and you can make stuff like these.
Well, that's beautiful. How long did it take to make this?
30 minutes or something.
You did this in 30 minutes?
Yeah, it doesn't take that long.
Your dad and I would take at least 30 days. That is really neat. If I hold that up, would you show me again how we do that?
So you just take the needles and go like that.
Keep going, because I want to see that turn into something. What are you making? Another flower?
Bunny.
A bunny. You are quick. You go, girl.
Yeah.
Why don't we come back in a moment and see your progress? If you want to keep working on this, please do. David, you have a lot of treasures here. What are all these things on the table?
So we got a little bit of, you talked about sustainability and the process. So we start with, this is just a fresh shearing off of one of my ewes. So this would be considered raw wool. And then you can kind of see this would be a colored one, and this is a white. It gives you an idea of the kind of the lock structure and the luster that you get with the fiber. And then we have further examples, and this would be the wool that's just been washed and then dyed. One of the things that the Leicester Longwool is known for is its dyeability, how well it soaks up the dye, and then it shows that luster still in the fleece once it's been dyed.
Beautiful rainbow colors.
Yeah. And then we've got, this would be roving, and a lot of spinners would like this. This makes it a lot easier. It kind of aligns some of the fibers, makes it easier to spin. And there's some natural grays, and then you've got some of the light blue and pink that's been dyed.
So soft. We talked earlier a little bit about lanolin. Like, I remember when my father would shear sheep and we would help him, our skin would get soft and our clothes would be sometimes saturated with lanolin. What's the lanolin used for?
Well, lanolin is a very good lotion, very good for the skin. So it doesn't have the greatest smell coming right off the sheep. But
it's quite natural.
Right.
And so here you have something as well?
Yep, and so this would be a rug. My wife's mother put this together. But it's got the strength that you look for, that you want in a rug, but it's also got, it's vibrant in color.
Elise, we're back. How's the bunny coming?
Good. I'm putting the color on the outside now of the main part, and then after that I'll make the ears and the feet.
Will they be big ears or small ears?
Well, about like this size, because it's a tool that I use to make the ears, because it's easier.
Keep going on that beautiful piece of art. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think and tell a little bit about the vision you have for the Berryhill Farm? If we come back 10 years from now, what would we see and what would your family be doing?
Hopefully I'll be better at what I'm doing now. Every year I learn something new. Every year I seem to experience something new, whether it's bad or good. I had my first set of triplets on the farm this year. But I also had, prolapse. So there's always things that you can learn, to do better. So I'm hoping in 10 years you come back and I'll have better, more consistent fleece, better, more consistent sheep, just probably a better oiled machine by then.
Well, looks like you're well on the path. Will you also include people more often and larger groups of people?
Well, I think we hope to. This will be our third year on a farm tour, and I've talked about wanting to have people come out in the spring when we have all the lambs. That's when it's the most fun to see those little lambs bouncing around. So I hope to. Maybe have some spinning groups in one of the buildings.
Fantastic vision, and I wish you well on it. In the meantime, between now and then, it's a great place to live, great place to raise your family, and a Texan is learning to be a Minnesotan. We couldn't have it much better. Thank you, David, and thanks for joining us on Farm Connections. Stay tuned for more.
When most people hear of a farm bill, they think of commodity programs and payments that affect crop producers. Some people may also be aware that crop insurance and conservation programs are included under the Farm Bill, and some are knowledgeable that food stamps are part of the Farm Bill legislation. However, very few people outside of government officials and policy experts are aware that the Farm Bill also covers funding for rural fire trucks and ambulances, export promotion, international food aid, forestry programs, ag research, and school lunch programs. The current Farm Bill, which was passed in 2014 and expires in 2018, is 949 pages in length and contains 12 separate titles, which covers a multitude of programs that are administered by USDA. Farm bills date back to the Great Depression era of the 1930s, with the first Farm Bill having just 2 titles and being only 54 pages in length. The Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933 established the Crop Loan Program, which is still in existence today. Under that loan program, producers could take out a low-interest loan with USDA using their crop as collateral before it's sold. Over the past several decades, the Crop Loan Program has been used extensively by farm operators to get needed working capital for purchasing crop inputs for the following crop year. The Crop Loan Program is especially useful to crop producers during periods of low grain prices and tight profit margins, such as have existed during the time frame of the current Farm Bill. Since the first Farm Bill in 1933, there have been 16 different Farm Bills in the past 80-plus years, with the next Farm Bill scheduled to be written in the next couple of years. New Farm Bills are usually written every 5 years, with the longest period between Farm Bills being 9 years from 1956 to 1965, and the shortest period being only 1 year from 1948 to 1949. The Agricultural Act in 1949, which is known as the Permanent Farm Legislation, was never repealed or allowed to expire and becomes the Farm Bill legislation for many commodity programs in the event that a new Farm Bill is not enacted when the previous Farm Bill expires. Many provisions in the 1949 legislation are very outdated, and the legislation did not include the food stamp program or many other popular ag and conservation programs. The existence of the fallback to the 1949 legislation gives Congress and the administration extra incentive to complete farm bills on a timely basis. It is now up to Congress to complete a new farm bill by the time the current farm bill expires on September 30th, 2018. That's all for today, but we'll be back next time with another report.
I would like to tell you a story of love and courage, a story about my grandmother, Johanna. She was born in 1886, and she grew up on a farm near Fertile, Iowa. She had just promised to be the bride of Steen Wagner. That's how they pronounce it in the old country. Oh, she's not so beautiful as other women I've seen, Steen thought to himself. But she's strong. She'll help me farm. She will bear my children. She will be my wife. Johanna was thrilled that a man such as Steen would want to marry her. He was tall, straight, handsome, beautiful blue eyes. So brave, too. At the age of only 16, he had sailed from Norway and had landed in Manly, Iowa, where he worked for a farmer for years. And so it was. In her first store-bought dress of brown cotton and lace, Johanna promised to love, honor, and obey Steen Wagner. Of course, newspapers next week would headline, "Manly Man Marries Fertile Girl." It was a 2-mile ride from that little brick Norwegian Lutheran church in Steen's brand new buggy, pulled by his favorite horse, to his brand new farm 2 miles south of Scarville. They curved up the driveway, and as they did, for the first time, Johanna saw the little wooden shanty that would be her home. The bed back in the corner, the homemade bed, she stretched out her white wedding quilt with the wedding ring design in the middle that she had been so carefully stitching for for such a long time, for this most special day of her life. That night, under that white wedding quilt, Steen promised Johanna a new house. Oh, there would be no cold Iowa winter winds that came in through the walls or the windows, not in their new house. Next summer, all the neighbors came. They brought their hammers, they brought their saws, and they held a barn raising. Within 3 days, the most wonderful barn in all of Winnebago County belonged to Steen Wagner, and he was proud. The next summer, their first son was born. The next summer brought the second son. But when the third summer brought the third son, Steen was angry. Johanna, I wanted a daughter this time, not a son. Because you have given me another son, tonight you will come with me to the barn and help me milk the cows. Johanna didn't understand this kind of love. But she got up from her bed. She went out to the barn and she milked the cows. That night, the next night, and she grew stronger. She learned how to cook on that wooden cook stove. She learned how to make the children's clothes from feed sacks bought at Risso's store in Scarville. She raised chickens, she raised ducks. She sold the chickens, she sold the ducks, she sold the eggs. She grew stronger. And not long after, a daughter was born. And then the second, and then the third. And it was years later when the second daughter was sitting in the kitchen stitching her white wedding quilt that she said, "Ma, Pop promised you a new house. Do you remember?" Of course, Johanna remembered. But every time she'd brought it up, Steen had seemed not to hear. It was one morning as Johanna was making her very best, an apple pie, that she heard men's voices out in the farmyard, and through the window saw all the neighbors gathered with their hammers and their saws, and she ran out to Steen. "Steen, what is going to happen? What are you going to build?" "Never mind," he said. "Men's work. Go inside." It didn't take long before Johanna realized that what was being built was another new barn. Just in case any of the people in Winnebago County had forgotten that Steen was the best farmer, they would now be reminded. Steen came into the house after the barn was completed and announced that he would be going to Lake Mills to buy a new team of horses good enough for his barn. Johanna walked across the farmyard and for the first time stepped into that barn. It was beautiful. It was huge. There would be no cold Iowa winter winds that came in through the walls or the windows of this barn. She looked around and the doors on the horse stalls, wouldn't they look beautiful with the quilts she had made from the leftover feed sacks? And the alleyway where the stanchions would be hung and the cows would be milked, the perfect place for Hazel to walk on her wedding day. Oh, there was no supper that night. Just 6 grown children asking no questions who moved the household into the barn. Steen came home the next day, and as he and Johanna walked to the new barn, he thought he could smell his favorite supper cooking. He stepped in and fell to his knees. "Oh, Johanna," was all he was able to utter. Not many years after, found Johanna lying in that homemade bed under the now yellowed wedding quilt. She was 57 years old and dying. She was just worn out. As Steen held her hand, she said, "Our Father who art in heaven." And as she took her last breath, Steen finished the prayer. You see, it wasn't until right then he realized that that plain little woman he had married all those years ago was his strength. It was she who taught him to love.
History gives us perspective. The insight gained provides us the opportunity to learn from past mistakes and enable us to find future successes. Whether it comes from analyzing data and facts, taking a chance on a rare commodity, or learning hard life lessons from stories passed down through the generations. With every passing season, we are given another chance for renewal and added perspective. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thank you for joining us on Farm Connections.
Funding for this program is provided in part by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.